Before we begin, in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. This acknowledgement was brought to you by CalgaryFoundation.org. Now, back to the podcast.
Have you guys ever read Zong?
What?
No.
Zong. Okay. So it's a poem I'm going to cover today, and I'm going to quickly send you
It's Z-O-G?
Z-O-N-G, Zong.
Oh, it's
I'm gonna
Zong.
send
Okay.
you
I heard
a-
Zog too.
I posted a link to excerpts of it that I will be talking about because I feel like y'all have to see.
I looked at the first 5 pages and I was like, I don't want to spoil myself.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it's really good. It's probably one of my favorite poems. But
Okay.
like I just
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Hey there.
Bonjour. My name is Dean, and welcome back to the InkGuild Podcast. Just go to fucking therapy.
If I develop Sims, delete the channel.
We need to start a revolution.
And you know what? I'm gonna say it.
All of them are fucking idiots.
25 is technically you.
Just say your morning routine.
And that's fucking it. Excuse me?
Where my Grisha's at? Yo.
I'd like you to rephrase that, Simp.
Is my guilty boner. Like, you'll attract the kind of people that are into serial killers. That's still bigger than a city.
It's more than one planet.
Percy Jackson is Greek mythology fanfiction.
Boneless. Oh my god.
I want no.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the InkGuild Podcast. My name is Charbel. I'll be your host for you this evening. Dean is here, but I'm running the show. Today's episode is going to be a poem recommendation, poem/lyrics. Basically, we got together to discuss some poetry, some song lyrics. So I'll just kind of do a little roll call, see who's here for the evening.
Well, as Charbel said, I am here. Hi, everybody.
And then we also got...
Yeah, I'm Lee. I'm here.
All right, so you got Charbel, Lee, and Dean. Basically, we got some poems that were our song lyrics. Anyway, it's all the same. So we kind of been just vibing with these last couple of days, or who knows how long. We'll just talk it over. So enjoy the show.
Nice. I like that. You get the host approval stamp that doesn't exist. All right, so I believe what Charbel kind of like, how he's kind of structured is that so I speak first and then he goes and then Lee
Third.
kind of goes. Yeah, we have our own set, or we have our own round of picks, right?
Yeah. So so basically you could just, when it's like you'll go first, you have to do a check-in or whatever,
Right.
and then you can just pick one out of your 5, and then we'll talk it over. You explain it, and then we'll talk it over, discuss it, and then go on to me, and I'll pick one of mine.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go on to the next one.
Well, actually, now that you bring in like the check-in part, I know that I'm not hosting, but I did want to ask Charbel, since you're joining the season, I guess pretty late. How have you been? Like, what have you been up to?
I've been good. I've been what did I do? Really, I just got a tattoo this month, and I just been freaking letting that heal. And then I did obviously writing the stand-up. That really took out so much of my time. I read a poem book, which I'll explain. It's in my list later on, and I just kind of think really checking out the poetry that I've been checking out these last couple of months and picking out, like, if I had to pick a top 5, not really top 5, but like the one that I really thought was weird. So that's what kind of gave me the idea for this episode. I was like, I really like these couple I found on YouTube. They're easily accessible if anyone wants to check it out.
Right, yeah. Nice. Yeah, I saw that you did stand up on your Instagram, and I know that I mentioned this already in the beginning, before we started recording, but what was doing stand up like?
It's called, I was kind of worried that it would, because I'd like to add some humor to my poetry, obviously. So I was worried if there's going to be an overlay. But as I started, I wrote like at least 20 jokes these last 2 weeks, and some of them were like longer tidbits and stuff. And I was watching a lot of stand-up comedy guys that I like and respect, and I was watching everything. I would study them, how they performed, how they said their words, and then how the joke was actually set up, blah blah blah. And basically, like, it's kind of like it was hard because that's like I try to relate what do people know that will think it's funny, and I had to like it was such a weird thing. Like it was cool because that's what I wanted it to be. I didn't want it to be just like set up punchline, that's it. Like I wanted to go really depth about it. But I was fucking nervous, man. I was like I could just fucking crash and burn and no one would laugh. Either way, it was free. I was literally just wasting my time. But I did a full 5 minutes, and I only posted like one joke, obviously, and I only had a minute and a half fucking ready and prepared. So after that minute and a half went, I was like, I memorized most of my other jokes because I was worried that if the ones I had prepared failed, I had other stuff that I memorized. And I just kind of went off from there, and fucking like people laughed. And I was like, afterwards I went back to my notebook and I picked out the ones that people laughed at and I saved them for myself. And then I was gonna find more material. Like it's literally just like kind of go from there. It's like I've been thinking about this for years, and I was like, I don't know, maybe the last year or so, I started paying attention to like why are people laughing at stuff I say, and I started thinking about it. And then after I sent out my poetry for publication, I was like, I might as well get into stand up and just like fucking fully use this English degree and fully become a writer, basically.
Yeah, like having that platform, I think, to kind of, or like having like a public platform like that to like gain that kind of public speaking experience. Like I know Marcus has plenty of like that because he's strongest in spoken word. And I think like some other people have had like different, public speaking experiences in general. But
that was like I mumble and stumble my words a lot when I'm talking. That when I was performing, I didn't want that. So I like, even now, I like really, when I'm just talking to people, I kind of try to prepare myself. What am I going to say next? How do I say it clearly?
Yeah.
Just because it'll make my life easier when I'm performing on stand up. And I started talking to people. I'm gonna do like way more shows. I'll post it up on my.
Yeah, it sounds like a really fun gig.
It's literally just shot in the dark. It's like people don't laugh. Gay fuck it.
Yeah.
It's either.
Yeah, just that joke wasn't, or that joke didn't work. It's whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess, again, I'm not hosting, but I was checking in with Charbel. I guess then we can just get into the actual like sharing of poetry. So my first recommendation starts off a bit light, I think. And I say light because I've structured my poetry, or my recommendations that fit personal attachment. Like I'm very attached to my media, and this first one comes from the thing. It comes from the book In Fine Form, 2nd edition, A Contemporary Look at Canadian Foreign Poetry, which, funny enough, Charbel and I used for our poetry class in the winter semester. Specifically, the piece that I'm going to talk about is a prose piece by Lorna Crozier, Glossography of G. For the sake of copyright, I can't read the entire piece out, but I do want to read one line from it, and it'll kind of give the idea of what, or like how, like thing. It'll set up like why I want to talk about this piece. So the first line is, "Let there be geraniums, gerbils, gutters, galoshes, gizmos, gramophones, and goo." So it's a lot like that. Like it is pretty, like the title should be pretty self-explanatory by then. It's just like a lot of G words, but it's not just that. And I mean, like, obviously when you kind of first look at that piece, it's just predominantly a lot of alliteration with G words. However, I think like that's probably one of the, or sorry, I'm kind of going all over the place, but basically with Glossography of G, one of the immediate things that people would kind of catch on to when it comes to that is it is a lot of alliteration. Like, it's very alliteration heavy, and alliteration has always been like that kind of fun literary device that kind of keeps people interested, I think, like, or keeps people interested. Like, it's a fun literary device. Like, it's something that, like, if you have multiple words of the same word together, then, you know, saying it, like, you know, I don't have an example off the top of my head, but I think what I like a lot about I think specifically what I like about Glossography of G is not just the alliteration, but it's something that, like, I kind of noticed with it, and that is the fact that there are a lot of complementary R and G sounds. So, like, obviously when it comes to the G, hence, you know, being called like Glossography of G, you're going to have a lot of G words, but for some reason like a lot of the R words are, like, a lot of the G words that have GR in it, or like have an R in it, just roll off the tongue really well. Like in that first sentence, geraniums, gerbils, gutters, gramophones. Like, I don't know what it is about, like, just the differing sounds between G and R. However, they just complement each other really well. Like, they really pair off nicely and read off really well, like in just that one line. But throughout the entire piece, there are a lot of differing GR words, like gingerbread, gonorrhea, grime, grim, gruel, grackles. Like, I don't know, it's what makes alliteration fun, and the reason why I chose that as my first piece is because it's a fun piece. Like, it's very fun to, like, read through a bunch of these, like, G words, because alliteration's fun. So that was my first recommendation. It is part of the collection in fine form, but I'm pretty sure if you're able to look it up online, you might find it somewhere. So
yeah, I don't got the textbook with me, but that is a good textbook. It's by in fine form by Kate Braid and Sandy Street. If you want to pick it up, the listener, it's actually I love that textbook, honestly, because I did another poetry episode. I mean, a poetry class in university, and she kind of, I'm not gonna say who. It's a very famous book, but I found it a little bit too, like, emotional, and like it's like I want to find the technicalness of poetry more, and in fine form does that a lot, where it gives you, like, here's a poem, here's why it's good, like, analytically, and it's also why it's good to read out.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that one poem you recommended is, like, it's thick, because it's like, it must have been a lot of work to figure it out. It's not just writing random words on a page, trying to figure out all those words, all those alliteration, and then also to get that musical aspect of it going must be pretty cool. It must be hard, you know?
Yeah. And, like, to kind of elaborate on that, in fine form in itself is basically a poetry textbook. Like, it kind of breaks down, like, specific poetic forms and elaborates on it. So Glossography of G is a prose poem, which I think is pretty fitting for it, because prose poetry, for those who aren't familiar, is incorporating prose into, or is prose with a lot of poetic elements. So you kind of account for the enhanced imagery, the heightened senses, basically, potential, and what you kind of substitute for the line break in poetry, you need to kind of remedy that with your prose. And I think it's a pretty good example of prose poetry, because, like, each sentence just kind of, like, goes. I think, like, it never feels like, it never really feels like it tells its own kind of story, the way that it's structured. If you kind of look at it, it is all in one paragraph, basically. But again, like, to me, that just kind of makes it fun to read off. Like, everything is there for you. You're reading off sentence by sentence, having fun, saying these, like, really wacky G words that maybe you don't know exist or not. But yeah, I think it's just an example. Like, it's a good example of, like, a prose piece, because it shows just how creative you can be, not just with poetry, but specifically prose poetry, because not that many people do prose poetry. Like, it's certainly like a new, I don't want to say a new form, but it's like certainly a form that like is, I think, still coming into its own. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it's an experimental form that kind of develops as it goes, right?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the really interesting things about prose poetry. Is like you can kind of trace an evolution from where it started and where it is now, and I bet in 10 years you would be able to trace the evolution past that.
Yeah, I did one of my big I did one of my college papers on prose poetry, and it's like a really interesting study to look into, like how you can apply like poetic devices and literary devices into paragraphs rather than like traditional poetic lines, I think. Yeah, that was my first recommendation. I will hand it over to Charbel now for his first one.
Yeah. Mine is, it's actually the poem that got me into poetry, because I kind of followed the stereotype thinking poetry is all lovey-dovey until I read Dulce, Decorum by Wilfred Owen. Wilfred Owen has basically served in World War I, and this poem is basically a poem he wrote on the front lines of World War I. It actually originally started out as just a letter he sent to his mom, and he's like, it's just some gas poem I wrote. And then like a couple years after, 2 years after he died, it started to like get published and all that. I'm not going to read the whole thing. You can find it on the YouTube channel Spoken Verse, and most of my poems are on there. And it's also on the Poetry Foundation, but it's pretty well known. The only one line that I want to spoil it because I want you to read it out, check it out. The last two lines is always something that stays with me, where he says, last four lines, I'll be quick. It's like, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for desperate glory, the old lie, dulce et decorum est pro petra mori. So basically, dulce decorum est pro petra mori was from, it's a saying from a Roman poet, I think. His name is Horace. Let's search him up. Yeah. Yeah, he's a poet, basically. Anyways, that's translates to English. It's basically, it's glorious to die for one's country. So think about this. That guy lived in 65 BC, and this is 1920s World War I. And I don't want to spoil much about it, but when you read it, you can really figure out the meaning for it. That is like, it's kind of like a cautionary tale before you tell kids who want to go to war, who want to fight and serve for their country, like, they don't know the full extent of what that is. And like I really don't want to spoil it, but it is great. It's like the whole poem just really shows you the full extent of what a war is, and just those last four lines, kind of bringing up that whole it's basically controversial. Is like, is it really glorious to die for one's country? But he writes it in such a good thing, like, you would not tell with such high zest to children argent for desperate glory, the old lie, dulce decorum est pro petra mori. Like, the idea of children argent for glory. Like, I was talking with a buddy of mine, we were kind of talking over, and he has a friend who is in the United States Army in like Miami, and he's bored. He wants to go to war. And there's other podcasts like Jocko where he talks about like guys like that, and it's just such a weird idea. The people who do join the army, like, obviously I respect them and all that, but it's like they are a different form of being, and it makes me wonder, do they know they obviously do know the full extent, but it's like a discussion. Like, when I think about it, like, this discussion has been happening since the Romans, the days of the Romans, and then by the time Wilfred Owen served in World War I, and even now, we still talk about like the price of war, the price of sending people off to war,
right?
Even but it's a brutal poem, and it's what threw me right into poetry and kind of broke all my stereotypes that I used to believe in.
Mm-hmm. I think before I did have a question for you, Charbel, but I think before I get to that, I don't think I've ever been so bored that I wanted to go to war.
Yeah, Yeah, it's weird. The idea he's literally in Miami, man, just party, and he's like at the base just doing mundane stuff, but he wants to go to war. It's such a weird idea.
To quote Ted Nivison, like Florida in general is just God's waiting room. And I can pretty much see that. But I think, like, in terms of my question for you, Charbel, like, when exactly were you first exposed to this piece?
Okay, not the class we did, the class before, because there's 2 parts poems in our university, so it was that one because they split up into 2 parts, so it wasn't in fine form. It was in another textbook, and I still have the textbook, and I should really finish it, but like that poem was in that textbook, and I was just like reading it for like school until I got to Dulce Decorum, and like I read it. And then once I get to like the second stanza, I was like, what the fuck is going on? And then I went back and like I read it like 3 or 4 times, and I read the textbook chapter explaining the context about Wilfred Owen and how he was on the front lines of World War I for the British, and all the poems he wrote are the stuff he saw on the front lines.
Mm-hmm. Like, I ask because, like, I think especially when it comes to like First World War and Second World War, like written media, just the descriptions that people tend to have about those kinds of events is very visceral. I think, like, to kind of allude to, or I think to kind of reference a piece that I had read in grade school as a small tangent. It was a book, I believe, called The Wars, which is apparently a Canadian story. I can't remember who the author was, but it tells the story of it tells the singular story of a World War I soldier, I believe, and just the events that like are shared within that novel are just so visceral and so graphic. I think that it's kind of one example of just how real and how influential that kind of time period was, even now, because it's one thing for you that kind of went like, holy shit, this is so intense, but at the same time it's also that kind of storytelling, that kind of like detail that got you invested in a whole writing form in the first place.
Charbel, I'm not sure if you said this, but if you did, I didn't catch it. What year was the poem published? Do you know?
Let me go on Wikipedia real quick. It was like 1927, around there, because I know he died. Oh, where's the Wikipedia page? That's like it's like, okay, so where is it? So first, I think the earliest one is from 1917. His mom had it, and then from there it got sent out, and then it kind of like by January to March 1918 is when it kind of fully got published and figured out. He died in he died in 1918. So it's like, most of his stuff got published right after, like, he's been dead.
Okay, I was just wondering because like there was a bit of a ghost ban on letters home and a ghost ban on people writing about their experiences. So it's always interesting to see like whether or not these poems are published posthumously because haha, what you're gonna do, or like afterwards, right?
Yeah.
I was wondering about that. I always find war poems very interesting though.
Yeah, and I'm just saying,
from that
even
era,
with like
because
I'll continue.
I was about to say because it marked a cultural shift around the greater European knowledge of war, right? Because suddenly it wasn't something that just a handful forces. It was an entire society and everyone was involved. So it's really interesting to see the shift in how they wrote about war.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my historian showing.
Yeah.
So.
And also, I remember, like you're saying, I remember I did research on him for some other class, and the British was trying to keep the pro-war propaganda going at that time. So he was. So my whole thing was about that. The British propaganda versus the stuff they're trying to silence out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like I was talking to this with another buddy that, like, we're talking about like Russia and Afghanistan and China and all that shit. And I was like, I feel like the reason we don't in the 21st, 22nd, 22nd century, whatever we are, and the reason we don't want to jump head first to World War III is because the things we've seen in World War I and World War II, and we know that we're like, we don't want to bury that cost again, especially now since we have way more destructive. Obviously, someone would argue, well, blah blah blah. We have Geneva Convention, and our the cause of death has dropped because of our advanced technology, but it's still war. They're not going to. You think they're going to stop bombing like innocent civilians just because of the Geneva Convention? They'll still fucking do it.
Yeah,
pretty much.
We've discovered that war is a lot more dangerous than it was before we made super weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thanks, humanity.
Well, that's kind of my bit. I'll pass it off to Lee.
Funnily enough, your bit leads directly into my bit. Because the first poem I want to talk about was A.E. Houseman's Epitaph on the Army of Mercenaries. And it's really interesting of it to Epitaph. And for the longest time, because when I first experienced it, I was reading a book called The Runner, which was about the Vietnam War. And this situations revolving around that. So for the longest time, I thought this poem was about the Vietnam War and people that were drafted into a fight. Plot twist, it's not. It was originally published in 1917. And what's interesting is that it is almost the opposite of Charbel's poem. It's not necessarily glorifying war, but the entire point of the poem is to paint the BEF or the British Expeditionary Force in a positive light, because they were getting a lot of flack and they were called mercenaries in a very almost slanderous manner, according to Houseman. So he decided to write the epitaph on an army of mercenaries. And I think my favorite phrase from this, I'm going to read a little couplet phrase. I don't actually know if that's a term because I never actually studied poetry. But it's in the last stanza, and it's, what God abandoned, these defended, and saved the sums of things for pay. So, this was written directly after, the BEF got wiped out in the Battle of Ypres, right? So, it's a really interesting take on it, because it's it was allowed to be published, because it was hey, support what's happening here. But the more I read it, the more I'm just it's basically being hey, remember, these people were people once upon a time. And they kind of died a terrible death.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Wow.
To defend what God abandoned, which was the breakdown of the social order, blah, 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 blah. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. It's that one I'll save for myself into my good poems list.
It's really good. And I will admit, I like short poetry because I have no attention span. But for a 2-stanza poem, it's got some punch.
And I like that. We have to I'm not this is beautiful, A.E. Houseman's poem, and also Wilfred Owen's poem. They're two different viewpoints, but they're both written so beautifully. And to get that beauty in poetry, it takes a lot of skill, and they must have worked hard on it,
Yeah.
It's just 8 lines, your poem.
Yeah, and to kind of elaborate on that, that's what I think makes poetry in itself such an interesting written form to begin with, because you can summarize in 4 lines how many people have been going through pretty much all their lives. You can summarize trauma in 4 lines as an example, and that's, I think, pretty amazing. Kind of scary, but pretty amazing. And I think with war poetry, especially, to kind of tie it back in, just capturing as many different aspects of the First and Second World War as possible. It certainly is interesting to see it done through like poetry and written media in general, but I think relating to poetry, yeah, in 8 lines to kind of, you know, I guess to kind of rephrase it, or I guess to kind of emphasize it, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. What I find really, really punchy about these poems written in this time period is like we are so far removed from the First World War, but these poems will still get you right in the guts.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can read it and you can sympathize and understand with what's happening. And I don't think that there's a lot of historical events that will still get people the way poetry from the First and Second World War will. And maybe part of that's just the sheer media saturation around those events. But like there has to be something in the sheer skill of these two poets that they still get you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They must have done like a lot of just thinking, honestly. I don't know, you gotta really think about just the global scale of what they're living under. And that not just for war poetry, but all kinds of poetry. Like everyone has opinions, but the way you say it is individually up to you. And those, you know what I mean? And that's where that's what poetry at its highest. What I really like, where they can just say something that we're all talking about in their own beautiful, elegant way. I'm going to do like a quick honorable mention since we're talking about war poetry. I've read this a long time ago. I don't remember it, but The Hollowed Man by T.S. Eliot is really good.
That's a delightful poem.
Yeah, that one is like
just didn't make my
disturbing
list, but it's so good.
Yeah, I wanted to go back. I should want to go back into it, but I didn't have time for this podcast. But I was like, because I want to talk about Wilfred, but that's another great one.
I also feel like it's one that people generally know a little more, because I didn't know your poem at all until you brought it out and I Googled it.
Yeah, I didn't know what yours too. But yeah, the Hollowed Man, like they showed us that in school when in one of our English class when we were talking about World War One.
Nice.
Shall I move on to the second round of recommendations?
Yeah, we'll go to
then?
Dean.
Yes, we can. Yeah. My second pick actually is going to be a little bit quick. But I say it's going to be a bit quick because I, to this day, still know very little about it, despite it, you know, being a performance piece. However, A Growing Thing by Savannah Brown is a video on YouTube by the poet Savannah Brown, who, like, since discovering her work, I've just adored, because she is a great poet. Like I think it's through her use of like imagery and just sincere language. I think that's one thing. Like a lot of poets can have that kind of language, but it's the fact that like she is on YouTube, like presenting it in a completely different manner with A Growing Thing, for example, I adore so much, because that just means that like there's other avenues to presenting poetry nowadays. And in A Growing Thing, it is essentially a spoken word video that she performs with the help of a production crew. And it is like video wise, it's gorgeous. Everything looks really nice. There's this really like pleasing yellowness to the entire video. Like it looks really nice. But when it comes to the poem itself, it is a story like, and you know, feel free to elaborate or feel free to correct me, anyone in the comments, but it's a story of potential, of basically the narrator looking at the potential of where young girls and where young people have to go. And like I think the last stanza of the piece just kind of sells it for me. Like, let me see if I can quickly pull it up, but of the beautiful imagery throughout this entire piece, it is definitely that final stanza that I love so much, because it's where it kind of ties in and makes it very personal. Because you can have gorgeous imagery, but when you have a stanza that reads as, "So how can I not look at myself in brackets in the reflective universe behind our house, off the silver-tongued powder of August haze, close brackets, how can I not look at myself and love her too?" And I just like that just makes it like very personal, I think. Like it's that kind of internal struggle where a lot of us have always thought like you could have so much love for a person, you can see so much potential in another person, but like weirdly enough, why can't I see it in myself? And I think that just makes it a lot more personal for Savannah the author, but also for anyone like listening and empathizing with and like resonating with the messages that were said in the piece, because then it's just a way to, I guess it's just a way for you to think. It's a nice message to kind of dwell on for a bit, and like it certainly doesn't feel out of place. Like everything in the entire video, like the piece itself just complement each other so nicely, and that final thing is just a way to make you keep thinking about it. So yeah, if you guys want to look it up really quick, you can just search the YouTube video and then just check in the description, because the full piece is there. But it's certainly
Could you
like
say the name again, because I was not quick enough to type.
A Growing Thing, a Poem by Savannah Brown.
I actually love the trend of performative poetry that's kind of rising.
Yeah.
It's like lots of poetry when you read it or when you're first taught it in school is on paper. But I feel like when you perform poems or you recite them, it adds a whole other like layer to it.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
I agree. Yeah. Like with, that's why I guess that's kind of what makes spoken word poetry such a beautiful thing. Like hearing, like being able to hear like how a poet performs their piece is one thing, but like when it comes to things like, Savannah Brown's A Growing Thing, where you have video, where you have music, where you have sound effects, like it's such an interesting way to like modernize poetics, like sharing poems, like you said, and I'm personally all for it. Like whether it be on YouTube, TikTok, I've seen poems, like poets and songwriters share their pieces. There's so many different avenues for performers nowadays, and for like people in general to share their work. It's great, and I love that.
Yeah, I agree with that too. It's like this kind of reminds you of our Instagram poetry episode, and the reader can check it out. I mean, the listener can check it out, and I like it as a method for sure. And her poem, I'm just like reading it real quick. It's good.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, and it opens up a whole new potential and opportunities of like a whole boundary that the last 1,000 years didn't have, that we can fully utilize.
Absolutely, yeah.
For it. Someone's like, I'm not gonna. The comments are funny. They're like giving her high praise, which I like. I'm not gonna. We'll talk about it after.
Mm-hmm.
But even like not really spoken word, but when you have someone else read someone else's work, it's a big game changer. Like,
oh yeah,
yeah.
Like interpretations.
I have one idea. Like one thing I wanted to like recommend. It's not on my list, but it's the poem "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night." It's read by Jonathan Pryce. It's the guy who played the old dude from Game of Thrones. But this video, the guy has the Dark Souls Firelink music playing in the background. So it's literally like poetry plus Game of Thrones plus Dark Souls, all in like everything I love in one little video. And his reading of it is just for beautiful how disturbing it is. I love it.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I think that was mine. Or that was my second one. So I'll hand it off to Charbel for his.
All right. My second one is I had to include Charles Bukowski because I love his stuff. And a lot of his stuff is very kind of, I don't want to say mainstream, but a lot of people know his stuff like Bluebird. I'll just like, I'll show you the one I picked. So yeah, there's obviously Bluebird I like. Hell is a Lonely Place is crazy. The Genius of the Crowd. The one, So You Want to Be a Writer is another one. So I wanted to pick one that's like people didn't really know and I generally enjoyed, and it's called Law. And the reason I only found it is there's a documentary somewhere on YouTube of Bukowski reading his work. It's like 45 minutes long, and he reads law in that documentary. It's like interviews with him, go about his day to day, and then it cuts to him reading it, doing a public poetry reading. I don't want to spoil law, but it's just check it out. It's him and his buddy are outside, and they're hanging like first they were hanging cats, and then they started hanging dogs. And I'm just gonna read like the last stanza real quick because I just like the punch in the gut. And after bacon and eggs the next day, my friend pulled his pistol on me across the coffee and said, "Let's go." And we went outside. And here were all these men and women in the trees, most of them dead or dying. And he got the rope ready and I said, "What does it mean?" And he said, "It's authorized, constitutionalized, it passed the majority." And he tied my hands behind my back and then opened the news. "I don't know who's going to hang me," he said, "when I get done with you. I suppose when it finally works down, there'll just be one left and he'll have to hang himself." "Suppose he doesn't?" I asked. "He has to," he said. "It's authorized." And I said, "Well, let's get on with it." I just love that. I love it. They're all just, he's like, "Well, the last guy, he has to kill himself because we passed the majority. It's democratically elected, blah, blah, blah." Like, I just love that whole tidbit of just questioning. I don't want to say question the government, but basically questioning what the majority think. Is it always the right thing? It's like, it's such a good like political satire. And Bukowski just says like, fuck it, like, I'll let my friend hang me because it passed the majority, and then someone else will hang him until we get down to the last one. It's a funny, good satire. It's called Law by Charles Bukowski, and you can check it out on YouTube. Watch the whole documentary. It's a cool documentary seeing him just living day by day.
Nice.
Sounds
That
really
feels
cool.
like it read off like a skit, I think.
It's like the way he reads it, and even the way if I read it, like it has a rhyme to it. It's very short, like 4 syllables a line, and it's really quick that it does feel like a skit also. There is definitely a narrative to it because it gets the first couple stanzas, it's cats first, and then there's dogs, and then they start hanging horses. And he's like, "What the fuck is going on?" And he's like, "It got elected. This is what passed through Congress. We're hanging dogs now."
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I say a skit because like obviously you had read parts of that whole piece, and to know like because there's more to it, like like with a lot of skits, like it like what you read off just felt like a piece in and of itself, and that like I think is a tribute to Charles Bukowski, like who I'm not really familiar with, but just like when I have the chance to like listen in, like just now, it's like that is very impressive. Like that's really cool that he was able to like that you were even able to take that little section and it sounds like a very complete piece, but there's more to it.
Yeah, he also doesn't use a lot of fancy language, which I like. He's very like I don't want to say it's dirty realism, but it kind of is like that. And I like that, just very common language, really getting down to the nitty gritty of like, it's not romanticized or any of that stuff. I like that, of just the grittiness of daily life.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's my number 2. And I'll pass it off to Lee.
So my number 2 is also going to be really, really short. And I will admit, I don't think this poem is particularly skillful. But what I love about it, and what I love about a lot of poetry, is the context that it exists in, and how you can dig into that, and how it shows a shift, or maybe not even a shift, but a rebuttal of thought. So this poem is called Another Epitaph on an Army of Mercenaries. And it was written by Hugh MacDiarmid, who was a Scottish communist sympathizer who was around for the First World War and was writing during it. It is literally just a clapback to the epitaph of the Army of Mercenaries. And I love it because it puts in bold, like just completely boldly out there in plain language, why is this happening? Why are we doing that? And it brings up the fact that the the British Expeditionary Force were called the Old Contemptibles for kind of a reason, right? They were out there spreading the empire and enforcing the status quo, which for most people wasn't really a good thing. And I will read the first line of it because it's amazing. And it says, "It's a goddamn lie to say that these saved or knew anything worth a man's pride." And like just the clapback to the epitaph of the army of mercenaries, I think is really delightful and something I can sink my teeth into.
It's also what I really like about this. Like I love it. It's the exact same form as like he literally just copied everything.
He did, and that's why it's so beautiful, right? Because I will say it doesn't flow like the epitaph of the army of mercenaries, but I think it's better because it doesn't.
Yeah,
right. It's just out there to show being like, this is messed up.
Yeah, I agree.
It takes the art and almost the because like we do have an issue where we romanticize war a lot, and this kind of takes it out of that context and takes it out of the romanticism, and it's just like, yo, this is messed up, and I love it.
Yeah, I love that. I love it when like people just like be as creative as possible when it comes to delivering a message, even when it comes to like skewing the writing form a bit. Because if you like to kind of focus on what you said, Lee, about like how it kind of reads off a bit awkwardly or it doesn't really flow as well, like that had to be an intentional decision. Like there's no way that wasn't done on purpose, and the fact that it wasn't done, like the fact that was done on purpose, like you said, just kind of helps enhance the message. It just makes it so that war just doesn't flow. I guess that's a weird way of saying it.
For an uncomfortable topic.
Yeah.
Also,
almost.
like we were saying, that war is destructive, no control, and also the one that's pro-war, the other epitaph, it's because it rhymes, it's catchy, it gets stuck to your head, just like war propaganda. Like when you see the posters and shit, and it's like, you know what I mean. So they symbolize it so well. Like the guy who wrote the pro-war epitaph symbolized the pro-war argument so well in just 4 lines. And the guy who's against it symbolized the whole opinion of anti-war in such like it. This is stuff that you have to think it through. You can't just sit down and write it out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Which makes it beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
No, so that's like, and the thing is, I don't really know too much about the author of this one because like I've been Googling all evening, and all I find is a whole bunch of people like talking about how this guy's a hypocrite, how the guy who wrote this is kind of trash. And I low-key think that some of that is our own like cultural bias towards romanticizing the First World War bleeding onto this historical figure, right?
I found his Wikipedia page. Like you talk about Hugh MacDiarmid or the other, or Houseman.
Darmins.
Yeah, I found his Wikipedia page.
Because like normally I just follow the links from from what is it called, the Poetry Foundation.
Yeah.
And then I follow it.
Yeah.
So if you found the Wikipedia page, you.
Yeah, I like just copied and paste his name and like first thing pop up. But like, yeah, I like Law. That was not on the Poetry Foundation. My number 2 poem. Like, it's I like it when you really get down to the gutters of the internet. You can't find stuff that. I have some other stuff on my Spotify that I'll like talk about later.
Mm-hmm.
That are not on the Poetry Foundation.
I'd been meaning to like ask about that actually, Charbel, because I know that you like found a playlist where people. I don't know if it was a playlist or if it was like constant live recording of like of poets sharing their piece. Or like reading out their piece online. Do you remember that?
Yeah, actually, that's what I'm listening to. So it's called Life Mark, I think, the playlist on Spotify. And man, it's like 6 hours long of like this company Life Mark recorded poets reading their poems, and it's all just poets who are dead now. Like, let me just make sure I got the name right. Yeah, it's a playlist on Spotify called like Life Mark Presents poets reading their poets. There's Sylvian Plath. There's so much stuff. Robert Frost. I only got like do 20 minutes of it. And what I've been doing is if I found one I like, I would like save it to a separate playlist that I've kept for myself. So like for Robert Frost, I like The Runaway. I like Stopping by the Woods. Ted Hughes, he's Sylvia Plath's husband. He has a poem called The Warriors of the North, which is fucking brutal. And there's another one where I almost added to my list, but I had to dissect it. It's called Who Gets the Pope's Nose by Peter Porter. That one was like so close to make it on my list, but I'm still trying to figure it out. What the fuck does it mean? And I can't find any information on Peter Porter, like on the internet. So, but it's a weird poem. It's called.
You continue first.
Oh no, you go first. I'll just be saying the name. It's called like Soundmark Authors Reading Their Poets. It's on Spotify. It's a playlist there. I can link it on the video also.
Sorry, you're on a bit of delay for me because I'm so far up north. So I don't mean to interrupt you. But
no, it's all good. Go for it.
I really love poems that you can dig into. I enjoy a well-crafted poem because lots of poems will just ring like a bell and stay in your head. But I find the real enjoyment I get from poetry, like you were saying, is things you can dig into and try and analyze, and you kind of have to puzzle through.
Mm-hmm.
Because the wordplay and like how people use different words to express concepts is just so fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And I sound like a English lit nerd. I will have the internet know I am a history nerd, not an English lit nerd. Two completely different varieties of nerds. But it's just delightful to kind of puzzle through why do they have so many syllables? Why is the comma there? Where's the emphasis?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And
like I am sadly English major, but yeah, I do enjoy it. But even when I'm writing, because I do like writing within form and trying to stay within the rules of the form. And what I've noticed is just because I wrote a poem that follows the form doesn't really mean it's going to be good. So you really got to put some thought into like, what are you writing about? How can I show it off within the constraints of the form? And even if you're writing without a form, you still have so many tools at your disposable, just whatever, under your belt that you can add some beauty to it.
I was thinking about this, Lee, while you were saying and how like you love pieces that are like very like, I don't want to say deep because that just makes me sound like a nerd, but just like it's very deep, bro. But like no, like there's a lot to pick through and stuff. My third pick actually is one of the 3 songs that I've picked for tonight, and it in itself isn't really super deep because it's essentially just like a mainstream summer bop, and that is Industry Baby by Lil Nas X and Jack Harlow. What an odd pick for a lot of people listening. Like we had gone through war poetry, we had gone through
I didn't see this pieces, coming, honestly.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
So
go for it.
I adore Lil Nas X. Like a lot of people would like, it's kind of back and forth, like which one of his songs is like one of the greatest ever. But like for me, my attachment goes with Industry Baby because like for a summer bop, it's great. Like lyrically, it's just a fun song to like have on the radio. Like it like the beat helps definitely with it because like the trumpets and the brass and all of the thing and like the hip hop beats and stuff. It's great. It's a great song to listen to. But when you get down to it lyrically, it's really just a fun song to sing. Like when you have I guess to be a little bit more like, you know, nerdy about it, like the whole like in the chorus when Nas is singing about like, you know, get your soldiers, I'm not running from anybody. That's great. That's a great way of saying it. Like it's, you know, it's kind of portraying like the people who didn't believe in him. It's this one army and they've got all their soldiers that are like constantly criticizing Nas, and just it's a great way of, I think, just like saying fuck you, I'm doing my own thing and I'm winning at it, and it's great. Other parts that I love about it, like the internal rhyme, I think like Nas and Jack Harlow know how to fucking rap, and to anyone who know, or for anyone like criticizing them, like, you know, put your like throw your criticisms where it's applicable, but if you're criticizing their rap, they know what they're doing. Like I think Jack Harlow in his own right, like I'm not too familiar with him, but like his verse is great. Like he flows so well. His end rhymes and some of the internal rhymes are like really nice. Very complimentary, and like they're fun to sing to. For Nas himself, Baby Back, a couple plaques, that's a fact, throw it back. It's fun. The whole point of this is that it's a fun song. A couple lines that I love from the song, like, I don't fuck bitches, I'm queer. That's great. Love that. I love that he's not backing down from that at all.
Hilarious, actually.
Yeah, I love that, and I love him for that. Like, I ain't fall off, I just ain't released my new shit. That's just like, bruh, I didn't fall off obscurity. It's just not done yet. Like, that's great. I think let me see if I can pick like a specific one. In Jack Harlow's verse, oh gee, so proud of me that he choking up while he making toasts. That's a great scene. I really like that. The internal rhyme with G, me, G and me is really nice. Choking up, making toasts. It's great. And I think it's what makes this song so good, without obviously acknowledging like the really fantastic music video, is just how lyrically good it is. Like, it's really like a good summer bop. So that's my piece on Industry Baby.
Yeah. I love it because I've never heard that song, but it sounds amazing.
It's wonderful. It is so great.
I'll definitely have to check it.
Yeah. Again, complete oddball to what we've been talking about earlier, but like I needed to talk about either Montero, Call Me By Your Name, or Industry Baby, and I think far and away my favorite of those two is probably Industry Baby. And if for some reason Lil Nas X, if you ever see this, keep doing what you're doing. You're fucking killing it. You're amazing.
And what's it called? Like, lyrics and song lyrics fit into poetry so much. Like, honestly, poetry originally started as song with ballads and shit. But that's why I still thought about doing that rap episode. We talked behind the scenes about it, because there's so much like rap that are just generic poetry. Not even rap. There's like, the song House of the Rising Sun by The Animals. That's just literally just reading it. It's such a beautiful thing. Just reading. You can just get rid of this. And the song itself is obviously the cake. But yeah.
I would say the same about Hurt by 9 Inch Nails, but owned by Johnny Cash almost.
Yeah. So much good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many like really interesting poems that people, because like there's some really like metal lines in bands like Mother, or even like just any band. You could probably find a really like harsh, true line, but it's just hidden behind the music, and it's interesting because people don't think of songs as poems anymore.
Yeah. Well, even like, this is a lot off topic. There's a song called Skinless. No, the band is called Skinless. The song is called Overlord, and it's like a fucking brutal death metal band. But the beginning of the song is a speech from Caesar in the 1970s Planet of the Apes, and it just sounds like music. Should I read it? I'm pretty sure it's fucking like, it's from the 70s. It is real short. It's like, from this day forth, my people will crouch and conspire and plot and plan for the inevitable day of man's downfall. The day when he finally turns his weapons against his own kind, when the cities lie buried under radioactive rubble, when the sea is the Dead Sea and the land is a wasteland, and that day is upon you. Now, I love that line so much. When the sea is the Dead Sea and the land is a wasteland. And the context is Caesar is planning that humanity will eventually destroy itself, and that's when the apes will rise again. But like, you know what I mean? Like, movies don't have those. I mean, not all. I'm not gonna say all movies, but there are some movies could just definitely pack a good fucking speech in.
Yeah.
Nowadays.
Yeah, and I think like tying it back to music really quick, just when it comes to rap, I think like there are some golden gems when it comes to like rap and poetic imagery and like storytelling, I think in general, as what the InkGuild is. Like what J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, Joyner Lucas, like just the three of those alone, obviously there are more, but like they have wonderful stories in their pieces. And I think like even when it comes to a piece, like even when it comes to industry, Baby and Montero, like I feel like Lil Nas X is really building his career to be like fucking amazing when it comes to like just doing his own thing and telling people, if you don't like it, I don't fucking care. So yeah,
even I don't know if you like it's everyone I know knows this, but like Tupac started with poetry. There's like multiple interviews of him saying it, and when you read his rap lyrics, it's literally just it has the rhyme, it has the music, and like it's obviously poetry. Like that's where he learned his skill from.
Of course, yeah. Hopefully I don't get crucified for not bringing up Tupac when I was bringing up lyrical rappers.
Oh, dude, I'm like stuck in the 90s. I barely listen to rap. I'm still listening to like Wu-Tang, Tupac, Biggie, fucking Mobb Deep is the only one that's like an outlier that not all people listen to. Beanie Siegel.
Yeah.
Great, because I know none of these people, but I'm writing them all down.
All right, well, I guess that was my section on Lil Nas X. I'm gonna definitely talk more about music in my other picks, but yeah, I'll hand it off to Charbel for now.
5 minutes. I'm gonna use the washroom. Give me 2 seconds.
All right.
Cool. It's actively hilarious because my next choice is not deep at all either. Yeah.
Yeah.
As much as I just talked about poetry that you can sink your teeth into, I was like, this one has to go on, and it's literally just a fluff cloud in the wind.
What? I'm sure you'll explain it, but just like, I don't know what that means. And I'm very excited.
What I mean is there's things you can like sink your teeth into and they're dense and you need to sort through them and like engage a lot. And then there's this.
Okay.
And it's delightful. It's also literally written for children, so you know maybe that's it to do with it. But Shel Silverstein, man. Everyone should read Shel Silverstein at least once.
Yeah.
Or twice.
I'm going to write that down for me too.
You've never read Shel Silverstein? I bet you have. It's like a classroom staple in North America.
I bet I have. I'm not, like, no notable names are coming to mind right now.
Where the Sidewalk Ends?
Oh.
That guy, right?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I remember now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was like, I would be shocked if you didn't read Shel Silverstein at least once. And I like it because, like, say what you want. I think in children's media, you can get away with a lot more and a lot blunter telling than you can in adult media.
Yeah, I mean, like, that was what most kid shows, or like most, like, I don't want to say Saturday morning cartoons, but actually, yeah, Saturday morning cartoons and like stuff on like Cartoon Network for people in the States. Like, just there were a lot of adult jokes in like it was supposed to be kids media. Yeah.
It's also like you can get away with more difficult themes, I think, for kids, because kids are kind of just like and they don't think about it too much. But if you wrote it in adult like film, someone would be like, wait a second, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm back.
Cool.
Welcome back.
All right. My number 2. Okay. It's called Simply Everyone's Taking Cocaine by Maury Lachlan Young. It's on the YouTube channel Spoken Verse. I'm not going to read it out because it's like a 5-minute spoken word piece, but please check it out. It's funny. There's a story. That's literally the premise is in the title. Simply Everyone is Taking Cocaine. The guy's a spoken word performer, and he's still alive. He's like in his 50s. But man, that poem, that YouTube video has like 5,000 views, and it's like it definitely needs more. And even the guy who runs, or whoever runs Spoken Verse, he hasn't posted in years. And I'm like, dude, like, keep posting stuff, man. This is like people's access to good poetry.
I mean, with a title like that, I don't think there's any way the poem could be a letdown.
Yeah, I saw it, I clicked on it, and I was like, how is this not like this is hilarious. Just listen listen to the spoken verse guy say it, and there's a video on like the guy said you can get it on your iPod. So this is an old video; it's clearly out of date. But like, I want to find one of Murray, Lachlan Young actually performing himself because it's funny and it rhymes. It sounds like music. The guy's just sitting there talking. It's spoken word, but it sounds like music.
Yeah. Knowing nothing about the video, I'm just imagining like Charbel like loading up the video and being like, "Oh, everyone's actually doing cocaine. Oh my god."
Yeah, man, just like check it out. It's wonderful. Simply everyone is taking cocaine. That's how we end each stanza, and after what you see, it's hilarious.
I feel like it's one of those titles that will definitely put you on a search list.
Oh my god,
yeah.
Are we gonna get put on a list?
No.
We're too small time yet.
I mean, we've talked a lot of shit on this podcast. I don't actually want to be put on anything.
No, we're good.
Okay.
Just probably your internet search history.
They already know everything that we know.
This is valid.
All right.
I'll pass it off to Lee.
Nihilism.
We're at number 3, right? Yeah, we are at number 3.
We are definitely on number 3. And even though I just said I really like digging into things, I am going to present something that really doesn't need any digging at all. And so I bet most people are familiar with this author. And if you're not, he's the guy that wrote Where the Sidewalk Ends. And Shel Silverstein is one of my favorite poets. He is a delight. I particularly like the book Where the Sidewalk Ends, and I was trying to choose a poem to present as one of my favorites for this podcast, and I ended up choosing Helping or Invitation from Where the Sidewalk Ends. And now, as these are short little poems in a book form, I don't necessarily think that we'll get in trouble if I read one of the poems, because it's in a book and it's literally like 6 lines.
Mm-hmm.
So it's called Invitation. And I think you guys will get why I love it when I just read it. If you're a dreamer, come in. If you are a dreamer, a wisher, a liar, a hoper, a prayer, a magic bean buyer. If you're a pretender, come sit by my fire. For we have some flax and gold tales to spin. Come in. Come in. And it's such a pleasant little poem. Like, if poems were animals, that would be like the fluffiest kitten ever. It's just light and lighthearted, and it bounces on your tongue. And most of his poems are like that. But like every once in a while they do, because it's a poetry book for children, so they do deal with different morality facts or like different moral tales. And lots of it, like as you read it as an adult, deals with like feelings of alienation and dealing with rough things as a kid. And this is in between poems like Hug of War or It's Dark in Here about a guy being slowly eaten by a lion. And I love that. Sorry. Shel Silverstein, guys. Delight.
Yeah, I've heard about him. I haven't checked out his work by Humble Brag. Like, I've been compared to him once. But I'm like, who is this guy?
Really?
Yeah, on like one assignment, they're like, so I was like, hey, I want to be Charbel, but I need to check out these guys' works. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Just to learn from them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said my really with like pessimism, which I didn't intend to, and I'm sorry if that's how it came across. Like, that's a pretty big compliment.
Yeah. And I wasn't saying I'm surprised that you were compared to him. I was like, I'm surprised that you've never like interacted with his works before, because as an elementary school teacher, I will say Shel Silverstein is very much like an elementary staple, especially when you're first teaching poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to be fair, and not to necessarily speak for Charbel, but like as someone who is familiar with his writing, I'm like, your writing, Charbel, is like far from anything that I would see at an elementary school classroom.
Yeah, no.
That is
and it was like one poem I wrote that sounded off like that. And like, didn't he also write depressing stuff? Also, Shel, because I was like,
he writes some really depressing stuff.
I like
But
that
the
though.
thing is, like, he sneaks it in between light-hearted poetry, because, like, I was telling Dean this earlier, but, like, you can sneak things into children's books and children's media that you could never get away with
Yeah.
in adult media.
Yeah.
Like, you can be real brutally honest in kids' stuff.
And that's brutal. And that's a skill on its own. That he could pull that off. That he writes something that's appropriate for all ages. You know what it like in a way where it's like, holy shit, I can't believe he said that. But the kid's like, oh, I'm having fun because there's tigers on the page.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That is definitely a skill.
Yeah, like Shel Silverstein, I think now that I'm remembering him better, like he's very inviting with his poetry. And, you know, I guess to kind of like elaborate on what was said, like, yeah, there are dark pieces, but there are also, you know, there are ones like Invitation, I think, where it's just very welcoming and very whimsical, you know, like Lee said. And that's great. Like it, like really like a poet for everybody. That's almost kind of unheard of. And that's like, it's nice that like his work still lives on, I think, nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I was trying to like research him too to bring context into these poems as well, because like context is always interesting. And the most I got out of him was he asked his publisher not to like put too much of his biographical information out there. You know what? I support that.
Yeah.
That's sick.
Yeah, the better the anonymity, maybe just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It also gives it like kind of a blank slate, right? Because like you'll read this poem and then like maybe key facts from his life would change the poem meaning. And instead of having like background, like it's kind of like when you find out that Tolkien fought in World War I and you reread the Lord of the Rings trilogy and you're like, oh, that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
You don't have that with Shel Silverstein because you just don't know anything about him.
Well, what's cool is you got to figure him through his writing, like through his poems and stuff, which I like.
Yeah, and that's it.
It's an interesting thing.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But I think that brings us up to round 4 with Dean.
Yeah.
So for my final 2 picks, I'm really going to try to keep it as condensed as possible because these 2 songs, one of them I have such an affinity for. Like, I think it's the reason why I started listening to more of this genre in the first place. But this song that I'm going to be talking about, I think I recently kind of warmed up to it and really embraced it as my favorite song from this group. And it is called Break the Wall by Dreamcatcher. They're I don't want to say they're relatively unknown. However, they like compared to K-pop and a lot of like popular Korean music out there, they're very much trying to fight for the spotlight. And after listening to a lot of their like title tracks and B-sides, just they really do deserve a lot more attention because they are an alternative to Korean pop, a lot, especially for Korean pop with relating to girl groups. When you think of girl groups, you know, for people who are familiar with K-pop that are listening to this, you think of Twice, you think of Red Velvet, you think of G-Idol nowadays, but Dreamcatcher is the alternative because they embrace so many different genres, including alternative rock and metal, which Break the Wall is. Literally within the first few seconds, you get this amazing drum roll and guitar riff that is unheard of, I think, in most other Korean pop, especially in girl groups. And it's sick as shit. Like, music-wise, it's amazing. And again, completely unheard of in K-pop, but lyrically, it is an empowerment song. It is a song that is kind of, it's basically just a song for their fans to be like, don't let anything stop you. Break down any walls that are trying to keep you from like achieving your goals and stuff. And that kind of message is important, I think, and in a lot of media, and how that message gets portrayed and carried through. That kind of empowerment from a group that feels that like hears you and understands you, that is important and really strong. I think lyrically, obviously, like trying to translate from Korean to English, it's kind of interesting, and kind of reading out my favorite lines is not, I don't think it would do it justice. I don't want to like skew the meaning of what these lyrics mean from the translation, because you definitely need to experience it in its native Korean, because around midway through the song, I don't know if she's the lead singer, but like one of the vocalists of the group, Sion, she performs this amazing high note, like absolutely, like it's a group seller, that this entire performance. On performance too, actually, what I love when they performed it one time was that they brought in megaphones, which if you listen to the song, like that's, I guess, a way to kind of get the kind of like megaphone effect that they were going for in the music. But just symbolically, when you think of megaphone, you're trying to get a lot of people's attention. And I love that. I love that they have that little extra prop to kind of convince their fan base, Insomnia, to kind of like, you know, be strong and don't let anyone stand in your way. And that's, I think, kind of what makes me like it's kind of what made me really love this band a lot more. Like, I think they're definitely my favorite Korean girl group, because on top of like amazing performance and having that like rock and alternative sound, they are just like very genuine. They like compose a lot of their songs, and creative freedom is what I value a lot in my music, and they're just really wonderful. So yeah, Break the Wall by Dreamcatcher. It's like the group in and of themselves, they just deserve a lot more attention, and hopefully they get that soon, because like I would love more music like Break the Wall. It is great. That like I kid you not, if I was allowed to play music through YouTube and not get copyright strike the hell out of it, like I would play that first opening sound. It is so great. It's so reminiscent of like power ballads. But yeah, Break the Wall by Dreamcatcher.
Sounds like an amazing song.
Yeah, and it's definitely not what normally I wouldn't even say it's K-pop, because it's like rock, K-rock, basically. I was listening to it for a bit.
Yeah, it's especially when it comes to girl groups, like I was saying, like to kind of elaborate on that more, like girl groups kind of fall into a couple of different kinds of avenues. Like they either do darker themes where their music is still pretty poppy, however they rely a lot more on, you know, heavier stuff like guitars and like you know, drums and that stuff, or they fall into what's, I guess, kind of called bubble pop, where it's, you know, it's, if you think of, like, again, for people who are familiar with K-pop, if you think of Twice, like their kind of earlier careers and whatnot, like they were it was pretty much bubble pop. Like, you know, it's very like fun, it's very light, you know, very bright visuals and whatnot. But with Dreamcatcher, because they're an alternative, like the fact that like their entire aesthetic as an alternative, it works so well. Like, I think Boca, one of their title tracks, is among my favorite from their band. Like the different colors, like the different outfits. You don't see that in a lot of like the mainstream, like in a lot of like popular Korean girl groups. Odd Eye is my favorite title track from theirs. It is, I think, an emphasis of everything that I've been talking about. And I think Break the Wall is just like the epitome of like their alternative sound. Like, you don't have a breakdown like that unless it's from here, I guess, or maybe like somewhere where rock, I think, is a little bit more common, I think, and I don't want to say a little bit more accepted, but definitely a lot more like prevalent, I think. With Korean pop, or with K-pop, just there's a very distinct style to it. And Dreamcatcher as an alternative is so deserving of many different accolades. So, yeah.
You know, it's good to break the mold and change things up. And South Korea has been doing, you know, it's an international market, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So they can get access from there.
definitely. Yeah, a lot of Insomnia, their fan base is international fans. Just as a fun tidbit.
That's sick. Have you in terms of female bands, you know Arch Enemy?
No.
It's like a metal band. I think they're American. They're I seen them live. Like it's great metal. It's just not kind of my style. But they're another female band. There's also their Japanese baby metal.
I love baby metal though.
Yeah.
Okay, baby metal's amazing.
I love baby metal.
Talk about breaking the mold. That fucking broke the mold. I was like, I'm in. Already sold.
Yeah. I love baby metal.
It is cool. That's the one thing about technology is finding bands just, you know, from other countries and listening to their other languages and how they do things differently than us. Same genre, just they do things differently, basically.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's my round 4 pick.
All right. So my round 4 pick is How Fortunate the Man with None by Bertolt Brecht. Again, this is also on spoken verse if you want to check it out. It's, man, if I had to pick a favorite line, it's the refrain. And it kind of spoils it. But I'll just read it real quick. It's just 2 lines. No, 4 lines. The world, however, did not wait, but soon observed what followed on. It's wisdom that brought him to this state. How fortunate the man with none. So to kind of give context, this is from like the first stanza. He's basically talking about Solomon, which is like the biblical guy who wrote part of the Bible. But he talks about like in each stanza, he talks about Solomon, then he talks about Caesar, and then he talks about Socrates, and then he talks about like religious folks, and he talks about how like in Solomon's in the first stanza, it's his wisdom that led to his downfall. The Caesar one's probably my favorite one. The second stanza when he talks about Caesar, describes him, and then they talk about just how they murdered him, and then they say, well, it was like it's the same thing in the second refrain, except it's courage that brought him to that state. How fortunate the man with none. So the whole gist of the poem, and it took me a while to kind of figure it out, and I had to do some research on the YouTube guy talk about it, is basically it's fortunate to be the man who doesn't have wisdom or honesty or courage or religious obligations, because it would lead to your downfall. Like these are great men. We're like, Bertolt Brecht, he was alive during World War II. I think he died in I don't even know. Like, let me search that real quick. In 1956. So he was a playwright and he did some plays, mostly plays, but he did some poetry, and this is one of them. But yeah, it's just something so different. The idea, like normally wisdom and courage and bravery is something that you see good, but he kind of wrote it off as a curse. That it's like, you know, like I don't want to come off as like a prick, but it's that idea of it's something that's a curse, that you're so smart that you can kind of see your own downfall coming in towards you. It's the guy himself was also, he was like exiled out of Nazi Germany, because I don't know if he's a communist or what, but he was exiled. So a lot of this stuff he didn't even read. He's German, so he was traveling around most of the time. And it was funny. He was like exiled by the Nazis, lived in the States, and the States kept an eye on him because they also didn't fucking trust him. So nobody liked this guy. It's kind of funny. So yeah,
I'm not familiar with that one. I think I have to.
It's another one. It's like
doing some Googling after this.
Mm-hmm.
It's another one where it's on, like I said, it's on YouTube, and I saw it, and I'm like, this is great, and nobody's talking about it. It's only 20,000 views from like 2009 is when this guy published this video, and his reading of it, like definitely check out spoken verse, because I love his reading of these poems. There's so much good stuff. Ellen Edgar Poe is there. Bunch of Bukowski stuff is there. T.S. Eliot. This is such a good YouTube channel that I'm like, I don't know why this guy stopped posting. Maybe he passed away, honestly, because he sounds like an old dude doing the readings.
Mm-hmm. It's good that like playlists like that exist where you can have like multiple, you know, where you can have like a lot of like the very familiar names in poetry, but also like more underrated. I don't know if that's the word for it, but just like lower, lower recognized names.
Yeah, I think I found it. His playlist literally called it "Poems I Like That No One's Talking About." That was like where I found the cocaine poem, and where I found "How Fortunate the Man with None." There's also a song by The Dead Can Dance, but I haven't really listened to it. It's not my kind of music. But the original poem is like super dark, and like I know we're talking a lot about like historical pieces, and this is just me talking to the listener. It's like this historical piece is from the 1940s. It was harder to figure out than something written in World War II. So just because it's older doesn't mean it's easier. Sometimes it really depends on literally what's written. That you kind of either have to do some background knowledge, or sometimes the word that you're reading is not really the same context or the same setup as we use it now. Like it's a fun journey if you're into that. And it's a good thing to kind of get you better in English class.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think we'll pass it off to Lee for number 4.
Okay. So my last poem was A Little Fluff Ball by Shel Silverstein, and we are going to the completely opposite end of the spectrum for this one. And this is a poem called Zong. It was published in 2008 by NourbeSe Philip. So to understand this poem, I'm going to have to give some context and tell a little bit of a story. So she is a lawyer in Toronto. And she did her degree in the University of the West Indies, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, of course. And so what Zong is it's, blackout poetry or found poetry, where you take like a previously existing text and you like mark
Erase
it up.
Yeah.
So what Zong is, first of all, Zong was the name of a slave ship that was active in the 1780s. And what Zong is a court case that is between Grayson and Gilbert. And what it is an insurance claim. So what this insurance claim is based off of is actually like, this is a kick it in the teeth in a poem form. So what Grayson versus Gilbert is there was a ship that was leaving Africa and going to Jamaica as part of the transatlantic slave trade, but they overshot. They made a navigation error and didn't have enough water for the voyage. So what they decided to do was to throw cargo overboard. So in the end, it was called the Zong Massacre, and 130 Africans lost their lives during this voyage. And the insurance claim is that there was a precedent in naval insurance at the time period where if you jettisoned cargo in order to save other cargo, you could claim it in insurance. So this is an insurance case where one party is asking for the insurance to cover the cost of the enslaved people that they threw overboard, versus the insurance company saying, we cannot insure that because it's too expensive. And it was actually the start of the awareness of the evils of the transatlantic slave trade. And so everyone should Google it. It's a very, very, it's a kick in the teeth in a poem form, as I said earlier. But the one thing that I will read from it, because I'm not going to spoil any of it because it's so delightfully crafted. But if you read the first page, Zong number 1, it's essentially, you have to read through it a bit because everything's spaced out and stretched. And it's water. Was our water good water? And like, if you read it without the context, it doesn't mean too much, right? But as soon as you add the context of the court case, it is a really big kick in the teeth. And Zong also, if you Google it or YouTube it, it has very well performed live action where people will recite it and they will perform it. And yeah, that is Zong. I'm not sure I'm doing it justice because, like, there's a lot that goes into the tragedy here, whether it was the fact that regular ratios for the tonnage of ship was 1.75 and Zong had a ratio of tonnage to 1 to 4, over double their capacity on this voyage, or the fact that it started raining on December 1st after they had thrown people overboard and they gained water, but still threw over 63 more. Like, it's a true tragedy that was, like, it's a true tragedy recorded in legalese, and it's almost, it's the truth that should be spoken but couldn't, is the way that one of the articles I read described it. Because by taking out the pieces around it, the author of this poem and this book of poems has made, like, the bald reality of what happened true if you take away all the trimmings about what happened. And yeah, that's Zong. Sorry for the downer poem, but I really think it's a poem that everyone should read.
Is the PDF you linked the whole thing? Because
No.
it looks like
That's
no?
an excerpt.
Oh, it's only excerpts? Oh my god.
Oh my god. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the excerpt
PDF is, like, yeah. It's just choice poems from it.
I see.
Wow. Yeah,
this is
Yeah, what you linked is already like 61 pages, but it apparently goes more because what, the final page is 131 on this document? Like, I can't imagine just how long this keeps going for.
Oh, I see. It skips.
Well, it was a court case over 2 years, right?
Oh, wow.
And it went to court once, and then it went to court again, because the first time they're like, okay, insurance, blah, 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 blah. But then the insurance company was like, wait, we can't insure an illegal act. And then that brought up the question, is this an illegal act? Because technically at the time period.
Well, I was going to say, how long was this? Like, because did they even value them as human lives? Or was it like
No.
in the...
It was 1781.
Oh yeah, okay. So they treated them as literally cargo, like product.
Yeah, it was in the height of the transatlantic slave trade, and this court case is one of the. I actually no, never mind. That's wrong. It's not in the height, but it was in one of the, like, it was towards what would become the end. Yeah. And this was one of the court cases that gained a lot of attention because no matter how you cut it, that is a tragedy.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way you can dress that up. And I think the poem does a really good way of bashing you over the head with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because Zong number 15, 2, does a really good job. But I love how it opens just with a disjointed note that reads, was our water good water?
Yeah, this is the found poetry I love. It's just...
Yeah.
The idea they got to shift to how many pages and deciding which letters to erase to get your point across is just a whole. It's beautiful. There's a lot of cool found poetry that I like.
Absolutely, yeah. I can't imagine how long this could have taken.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's when we were talking about recommending poems, I was like, I feel like this should be one of the poems that they kind of force you to read some bits of in school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's this is probably going to be my semester because I'm doing post-colonial literature.
Nice.
But
with that discussion of Zong and the super downer note, I believe we're back to Dean. Enjoy it, man.
Well, thanks, Lee.
Springboard off that pit of depression.
I'll do my best because actually, yeah, I feel like I can because the final piece that I'm going to bring up is another song. It is specifically another K-pop song by, I think, arguably the biggest K-pop group ever, BTS. For those who I've talked to off podcast, and I think really just whenever the conversation arises, there is one song from that group that I adore with my whole heart, and that's Black Swan. I think for multiple reasons that I'll break down in a minute, but essentially Black Swan was the song that made me understand BTS. It's what made me like want to learn more about like each of the 7 members. It's what made me want to buy their albums. It's what made me want to like invest in these guys, because Black Swan is inarguably my favorite song from BTS. And I think arguably it might be my favorite lyrical song ever. I think, because without even getting into the lyrics yet, the instrumental is beautiful. Like, just I don't know how they're able to do it, because I'm not a music person, but just for anyone who gives it a listen, it is gorgeous sounding. It's like really nice, pleasant, like treble sounds that like isn't pervasive at all. But you know, and that kind of instrumental carries forth throughout the entire thing. It is a gorgeous sounding track, but lyrically, it is the story of, it's the story of each of the 7 members falling out of love with music. And that resonates with me because to BTS, music is their life. It is what made them come together. It is what made them perform in front of millions of people across the world. It is what makes them megastars, basically. And without even the status, like it is what drives them. It is what makes them like live and breathe, basically. Like, you know, full exaggeration, but like they are musicians. They are very good musicians, and I think Black Swan is like the epitome of expressing that kind of fear when that passion just runs out, which from a personal level, like I said earlier in the beginning, like I've ordered my list based on personal attachment. I have feared falling out of love with writing pretty much ever since I started to take it seriously, and that was like around the beginning of high school. And as I work on as I was working and as I still work on Xeno, my novel, just is it in any, like, am I just one day just going to fall out of love with this? Am I just going to completely know how to do everything but just not care about it anymore? And through Black Swan, like it's kind of made me like realize that, I think, like it's a way for me to be heard, I think, in my kind of fear in that, because when you're so passionate about something, and for me, like when I, as passionate as I am about creative writing, like the fear of suddenly not caring anymore scares the ever living shit out of me. So to have a song exist like Black Swan that hears me, like I couldn't help but love it. Like I think, again, just even like despite the obvious language barrier, it is such a catchy song to listen to. Like the thing, like the exchanging of lyrics between the 7 members, the raps, the actual vocals, like the vocalists themselves, they all play off of each other so naturally. It is also, like, to kind of break down more aspects about why I love the song so much, the music video is pure art, no question. It plays on Swan Lake a lot. It influences a lot from Swan Lake. So, you know, obviously there's the name, but then there's the fact that a lot of their choreography in that video is based on ballet. It is so gorgeous, so fluid, and absolutely stunning to watch in the music video. It's even more like it carries that kind of like majesty in live performances, but that music video complemented with the suits, with the lighting, the setting, like the theater setting, like it's wonderful. It complements itself so well. And in a way too, to kind of focus on one other specific aspect, throughout the video, when some members are singing, there are shadows of themselves early on in the beginning, and that's always a nice thing to kind of delve into when it comes to storytelling, like the shadow of a person, like what's in a person's shadow, what are they hiding, like what influences them and whatnot. Other things too, like I think what separates this song for me in terms of it being my absolute favorite, I think, is that storytelling, and is that kind of like very raw personal connection that BTS has been able to do with that song, because I was talking about this when I was talking about Dreamcatcher and their creative freedom. BTS has had creative freedom for a while now, and it's through that creative freedom that I believe that they've gained the army that they have now, basically, and that is because what they talk about in their music, not just, there's not just love songs, there's not just, sad breakup songs, but there's songs about dealing with your mental health. There are songs about losing everything. There are songs about them splitting up. There are songs about and then there's Black Swan, where it is a song about losing what you love most. And that kind of diversity and that kind of like passion and genuine sincerity when it comes to that delivery is like far and away what makes BTS like certainly my favorite band, but it accounts for their success. Like you really cannot argue why BTS is so successful, because they know what they're doing and they're allowed to do what they do. But I think all in all, just as a way to kind of conclude all of that, like, I want to say ranting, but just like all of that gushing for BTS, just, yeah, Black Swan is is undisputably my favorite song from that band, because it resonates with me and it taps into a kind of question and a kind of question / insecurity / anxiety that I've been dealing with for a while now. So to be able to listen to the song knowing that there are, despite them being megastars, that there are people like me who struggle with that same kind of anxiety is comforting. And that's it.
Yeah. This is gonna be a dumb question. It's all sung in Korean, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So is it like, how hard is it to get English lyrics? Do you find like multiple variation, or is there like the one solid English translation that everyone follows?
See, that's the thing. I think when it comes to with a lot of like big groups like Twice, ITZY, ATEEZ, they have English translations. They have full English translations. However, with BTS, they don't really do that. Like they kind of play, they have English in their songs, especially I think a lot more nowadays. They have whole English songs completely in English, but I don't know, maybe it's just because they have that creative freedom to do what they want. Maybe they just didn't ever see a need to like fully translate the song into English. But I mean, I can't speak for everybody, right? Because their music already is so accessible and resonates with an international audience. So maybe
I was always curious.
Yeah,
if it was like the band itself who translates, or is it the fans?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess to kind of tie it back in, like emotions speak a lot more than like actual verbal language, right? Like,
yeah, true.
You can always like tell when someone's sad. They don't always have to write it down for it to be a thing.
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
So when it comes to anxiety and when it comes to mental health, like that is something that many people understand and know is a struggle. So like in the case of Black Swan, people understand that. I think like it doesn't have to be a song completely in English or completely in Spanish or completely in Mandarin for people to understand. Like,
yeah,
there are translations of it because ARMY is very committed, but just regardless, like I can listen to the full song, not know a word of what it means, but just knowing what it means to them and knowing like how it comes across, like you don't need to understand Korean to love the song.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. Not really K-pop, but I'm the same way with. I'm gonna fucking oust myself as a weeb, but fucking some anime openings, good stuff. Also, like there's one band I've been listening to called Mass Hysteria, but like metal band, it's all angry, but it's French. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I don't know what the fuck they're saying in French, but you can definitely get the emotion through music alone.
Yeah, like music transcends language.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but yeah, those were all 5 of my choices. Let's hand it off to Charbel for his final one.
Okay, my final one is, it's a book. You can pick it up on Amazon, I guess, or do whatever you need to. It's called The Prophet by Kahlil Gibran. Kind of funny. So the way I didn't find this, my mom did. We were at a used book sale and she just tossed it off to me. And she's like, this is what I studied in my literature class in Lebanon. So I was like, oh, Kahlil Gibran. She's like a Lebanese American. He was born there, came to America, blah, blah, blah. And he's probably the best writer in Lebanon. Well, he is, like, just a fact. So I read The Prophet. I have a bunch of his short stories. I didn't really want to, obviously for the episode, I want to definitely get to his poetry. So The Prophet is an entire prose piece that's like, I'm reading it translate to English. It's like 99% perfect. There are a couple of words, and I don't know if it's just me because I know like how to speak Arabic and understand it, that there were certain lines in English I was like, this is kind of weird, but I get what he's saying because I know how it sounds in Arabic. So, but overall, it's very easy to read. There's different translations, and it's been translated like, it's like one of the most translated books of fucking all time. But it's just beautiful prose poetry that's written like very mystical and biblical. Like it just felt like you're kind of reading like the Bible or something that was thousands of years old, but at the same time, like, this doesn't exist. Like, it is fictional. The prophet is basically just, this prophet, he's leaving this town, the city he's been in for a couple of years, and the people are asking him questions, and each chapter is a topic where the prophet gives his thoughts on. And it is kind of funny. People like said Gibran is a philosopher, but he's like, don't call me a philosopher. But a lot of his stuff is very theological. He does care a lot of aspects of like Christianity and Islam, just because I just know about, like, if you know those religions, you can easily pick it out. But he brings in a very like agnostic, neutral sense that I feel like everyone can get along with. And a lot of the stuff he talks about everything, like love, marriage. The children chapter was like definitely something that what I thought was really great. Crime and Punishment, people would love. That was another good one. Pain was great. It is such a good thing just to read. Doesn't matter where you're from or your religion or whatever. The viewpoint is definitely something that you're gonna have to. It's super short. It's like 90 pages, but it's definitely like a neutral viewpoint. I don't want to say neutral, but it's stuff that everybody will agree with, and it feels good. But at the same time, it's not like lovey-dovey. He does get to serious stuff, and he kind of acknowledges the bad parts of life for it. But yeah, like I burned through it. I was like, just chapter after chapter, every different person asked him something, and his response is always like written beautifully. And then when you just understand what he's trying to say, you're like, this is a whole nother curveball. You can't think about what's going on in the grand scheme of life and all that good stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I should definitely seek that out. I've heard that poet's name before, and I don't remember what piece it was that I wanted to check out, but yeah, I think after hearing that name again, I'm gonna definitely like do a better deep
it's called
dive.
Definitely check out The Prophet. It's just like such deep things about just. Yeah, I had to go reread and really think about, like, what is he trying to say, and like I said, it's translated in English, and it's super readable in English, and it's also cool to get an aspect, because obviously I grew up learning here, so all the Western writers, that it's cool to learn about writers that are not in Western civilization. So he was definitely a big one.
Yeah, I think to kind of like briefly connect to what I was saying about Black Swan is that like there's just certain messages that transcend language. Like, you don't have to learn a language to know when someone is like facing some kind of existential crisis, or when someone is like dealing with anxiety, you don't need to do that anymore. Like, depending on thing, like regardless of like if you come from the East or you come from the West, like there are just some things that people understand. Like people, like as a civilized, like as a thing, like as a species, there are just some things that like humanity understands.
Yeah.
And isn't separated by.
Yeah. I've been like thinking, and like what you said, I would just call that empathy, like how important empathy is. Like, kind of, I don't want to like get back to my writing stand-up, but and also with writing poetry, a lot of it is just me thinking about what do I think, what are people thinking about right now in this atmosphere we're living in with the pandemic and Afghanistan and all this stuff, you know, and in general, everyone has their own struggles, the same struggles as me. So empathy is like very important to learn. And obviously there's some psychologists out there who's like, you have to teach empathy. You could train, you know, like, have you ever seen those experiments where they don't teach them empathy and they're killing dogs and shit? Like, empathy is important to teach for sure. So yeah, I guess we'll pass it off to Lee for her number 5.
The last poem that I chose Harlem by Langston Hughes, and I believe that Harlem was written in, I wrote it down here somewhere, 1951. And Langston Hughes, for people who don't have a random collection of facts and names, is one of the leading, well, not leading, he was a big name in the Harlem Renaissance. And he was the first Black American to make his money wholly through poems and playwrights. And Harlem and the book that it's in is a delightful look at everyday life, because he wasn't really, well, he was popular. He was very popular at the time he was written, but lots of people took exception to how like bald his poetry was, because his poetry, some people thought, put the people in Harlem and other African Americans in a bad light, because he gave a very like I can't word, guys, I'm sorry, it's late. He gave a very like almost real idealization of what's happening without painting too much of a romantic figure over the struggles that he and other people that he grew up with faced. So here's a quote from the Poetry Foundation thing that describes this a lot better than I just did. But much of Hugh's early work was roundly criticized by many Black intellectuals for portraying what they thought to be an unattractive view of Black life. But his poetry, for all that apparently was an unattractive view, is beautiful. And if you do have a chance, pick up a book written by him, because he's a delightful writer. But Harlem is a delightful poem. And it's a poem that it asks a question. And the question is, what happens to dreams, to a dream deferred? And it gives different answers, and I don't want to recite it all, but it's really good at punching a feeling of what happens if you have a dream and it is constantly cut off at the pass. Like, the world is constantly against you in some cases, because for him and lots of people, that is the reality. And then it goes through all of these, like, kind of pessimistically phrased answers, and then and then at the end, in italices, it says, or does it explode? Give it a read. It's a really great poem. Sorry that my ability to verbalize things in a coherent manner has steadily decreased throughout the night, but yeah.
You know that Spotify playlist? Actually, I tracked out. There's songs of him, reading his own stuff. I only read one of his stuff, and I really liked it about I can't say the name, but it's about the rivers. Like I know rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood and human veins. That whole poem of him reading it's like great.
He's a great poet, and I love how bald and down to earth his poetry is.
Yeah.
Because like something that has come up again and again and again when we're discussing poetry that I've noticed is there's inherent reflection and inherent connection that you feel with other people when you read poetry, and you can sympathize or recognize the emotions within yourself.
Right.
And I feel like Langston Hughes almost has that art form to a T, because his poetry is about everyday people, and it's everyday people dealing with awful things. And I'm not going to say I shared his experience, because obviously I didn't, but it's nice to see that reflection, because poetry is almost a cure for loneliness in that form.
And even if you didn't share it, like he's sharing you the emotions he felt through those, and it's empathy again. And another thing, like listening to him read his own work, it makes me think about, like, for me, like how he pronounces words, his accent, because he's from the south part of the States, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it adds a different music hearing his own voice saying his own words. It makes me think about, like, well, for me, if I have to read this out loud, how does my voice sound? How do I pronounce? Like, I have an accent. I probably don't know it, or I don't sound it. But you know what I mean? It gives a whole other aspect of poetry to think about.
Right, yeah.
Once again, if you can pick up his book, definitely do it. Or just go to the Poetry Foundation and look him up. Because the Poetry Foundation is love.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a great website. Like, it's a good introduction for obviously the listener or anyone want to hop on in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What are we doing on time?
We are 10 minutes from our destination.
Yeah.
Really? Holy shit.
We're also like the main recording itself is like 2 hours, so yeah, give or take.
Amazing.
We're doing really good on time actually, but
I'm glad. I was worried if we'd be like under times. I was like,
yeah,
it sounded like it was going fast.
I was really worried about me going on a tangent about Zong the way I did Deadpool, so I was like, okay, you have your talking points, stick to them, let's go.
I definitely took a little bit of liberty with my explanation, so I'm sorry if my ranting was too much.
Like
your ranting was delightful, and it provided all the context I needed to understand it. I just know that I get excited and go down historical rabbit holes that don't need to be explored, but they're interesting, but they don't need to be explored.
No, for me, I'm like, I don't want to say I'm like, I would get rid of the time limit, but like, I would rather want someone to completely finish their thoughts than to like abruptly cut them off.
Of course, yeah.
That's like my idea, because it's like, whatever it is, get your thoughts out. Interesting, not interesting. Like, just go for it. I want to learn, and the reader, why am I calling them the reader? The listener wants to learn. So yeah, any honorable mentions? I was curious about that. I tossed a lot of honorable mentions.
In the Woods Somewhere by Hauser, whatever. The guy who wrote Angel of the Small Death in the Coding Scene. I can't pronounce his name ever.
Crozier?
I've only ever... Yes, that guy. In the Woods Somewhere is an honorable mention for me.
Nice.
For me, my two honorable mentions are both Dreamcatcher songs. Because, which is their most recent single, I guess, but it's called their title track, and Boca, which is, or actually no, Boca and Odd Eye. I talked about that briefly when I was talking about Dreamcatcher, but those are my two favorite title tracks from them. They're great. They're also very like alternative sounding, play into very different genres, and they're wonderful to think. They're wonderful to like headbang to. Like really, actually, really.
Just go ham.
Yeah.
That's good though. Not while driving though. I've seen like guys fucking headbang while driving. I'm like, are you like really? You're driving a death machine right now.
Yeah.
Death machine and death metal, man.
Dude, literally.
Yeah.
So that's what it does to you. I have one honorable mention. It's a Bukowski poem, and it's called "So You Want to Be a Writer." And I've saved this one like like 2 lines. I'm not like 6 lines. I've basically saved it as like my motto for writing because I think he really hit the nail on the head. I'll just read it out. So again, it's called "So You Want to Be a Writer" by Charles Bukowski, and my favorite lines in it is this: "Don't be dull and boring and pretentious. Don't be consumed with self-love. The libraries of the world have yawned themselves to sleep over your kind. Don't add to it. Don't do it." This has been like my motto before fucking writing because it's just the idea of like, don't be dull, don't be boring, be yourself, say stuff that nobody else is saying, say the stuff that only you figured out on your own. And then the idea of being pretentious and self-loving, it's all about empathy. Like, it's like, I don't want to say don't focus on yourself, but think about the other people in this world that you're living with and the grand scale of just pick one topic, think about what is everyone thinking about this topic. And I just love that imagery of the libraries are fucking asleep, they're bored, and all the literature nowadays is boring, nobody cares. I love the idea of waking them up from their slumber like some beast. Anyways, that's my honorable mention.
Yeah, I got no other ones here for me, so
the only other honorable mention I have is real bad and real nerdy, and it's Pengurbane, which was written in the 9th century. But I just love it because it's a poem about a monk doing his job and the cat that chills with him and does its job.
What is it called?
I just love Pengurbane. So Pangur, B little apostrophe on top, AN. It's like ye old. It's translated from old Irish because it's not English. And it's just, yeah, that's why I was like, I'm not going to bring it up because like it's a little too off the keel, but I love the universal humanity in it. Because people seem to forget that people way back then were still people who got annoyed by their cats.
Those are the stuff also where I'm like, I was looking at a YouTube video. It's called analyzing the poem called "The Wanderer" and how it kind of contributed to Lord of the Rings, and it's an old Irish poem from like fucking Viking era, whatever. But the whole poem is about the 7 stages of grief, except they changed the 7th stage, and I'm like, how did they figure this shit out? Like it's again, like you were saying, emotion that just transcends time and language, and it's just part of the human experience. It's cool how this stuff gets passed down.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I guess that's it, honestly. We'll just close out for the night. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. We hope you had fun. We hope you enjoyed it. Again, we're the Ink Guild at TikTok, at the Ink Guild, no spaces, on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Our main home is YouTube. Check us out on YouTube or Spotify. But you can also connect with us individually through our social media. Mine, for Charbel, it's at thisdude7 for Instagram. Also, check out our Winks if you want to learn more about us. That's basically all our other connections. I'll pass it off to Dean to do his informations.
I don't know. You did a pretty good job. I didn't really, or I had a question actually. It's kind of like a closing segment, and I've done this with those that I could in kind of like when I could sit in on these podcasts. But basically, just what was it like hosting, Charbel?
Wait. Well, I'll answer that after. Do you want to add like your social media stuff, or I'll pass it off to Lee?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. My social media is at Daniel Cordero on Instagram and Twitter, and I am at Dean_Aston on TikTok. I think that's what my thing is. I need to change it. That's that's an inside joke that I decided to carry into TikTok, and I think it's kind of past its welcome at this point.
And then for Lee,
I have no plugs, and I prefer my social media remain
nice, off the radar.
So I hope everyone had a good time. Nope, well, I also like literally have no social media, so like There we go.
Mm-hmm.
That's good stuff. Going off the radar is good. I want to do that. I guess that's it. You guys have a good night. Thank you for listening in.
Wait, Charbel.
Yeah.
Sorry, a quick closing segment. What was it like hosting?
Oh, it was cool. I kind of like you saw my messages. I was thinking about it so early ahead of time. My biggest worry was us going too long, but I had no control on that. I was like, if I could just toss a couple of things to get the discussion going, I was actually worried if 5 poems would be too little. I would go less time, and I thought about doing the 10. But I'm glad 5 is like the right number. We hit the 2-hour mark.
Oh yeah.
Because I was like, all right.
Yeah. Would you want to would you want to host another episode for future seasons?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I like doing this stuff. I like to freaking hit the ground running. And I was thinking about it just now, like we were recording, is doing like a song lyrics episode specifically would be good. As like a part 2 fucking segment of this. You know what I mean?
That'd be fun, yeah.
It was cool that we got some songs in and some poetry in, and because like we were talking about how music has so much meaning with them, that we could definitely do a song lyrics episode.
Absolutely, I'd be down for that.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I wasn't too worried about it. I was like, once I had a plan of like, well, making my list was harder than like figuring out the plan. I was like, all right, just discussion questions, for list, good to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, that was my closing segment. So yeah, you can properly sign the episode off then.
All right. As I say, check out our other stuff. Stay tuned for more episodes.
Have a good night, everybody.
Peace.
Bye.